Well, from Mali to Guinea and now Sudan, the region seems to be getting unsettled. Now, what is fueling military incursion in Africa in recent times? Well, Paul Ogwu, fellow of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought and a public affairs analyst, joins us to discuss this development. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I guess the fundamental question then would be, why has Sudan not been able to find a workable political system since independence in 1956? Coup after coups, counter coups, and all of that, and now this. What's fundamentally wrong?
I think Sudan is not actually different from every other country, especially within that region. There's no actual stable government within the neighboring countries of Sudan. So when you look at the composition, one, how the formation of Sudan, how they came to be, so it's been a struggle. Like I said, that part of the country seems not to have embraced democracy. They've been almost all the countries have one form of dictatorship or the other. So it's an environmental issue, one, and the composition, how they Sudan broke away from Sudan. So they've had this issue of how do they manage their diversity.
All right, almost all the countries and institutions have been talking, from EU to AU, but I'm interested in what the U.S. Embassy had to say. It condemns what it calls forced removal of the civilian government. They didn't call it a coup. Forced removal of the civilian government. What do you make of that statement? And will their stance really change anything?
I think yes. When you look at, if I want to dive into the economic, Sudan is equally experiencing huge economic problem. So, and they need some sort of global coalition to sort that one out. That one is still there. So America is saying that, don't forget, for the past 2 decades, America have actually invested too much money.
In fact, they're stopping the 700 million
for democracy in the whole Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at, there's a pushback. That's what you mentioned, the coups in Mali, the coups in. So there seems to be no stability within our region. And not only that, even the governments that have democracy seems to be a pushback on civic space. And democracy is not only about election. Democracy is about human rights. Those are very vital, very important. Those are very major ingredients of democracy. So there's a conflict actually going on within the continent. And America won't find that for theirs. They've made this thing of their intervention in most of these countries. How do they stabilize the countries? Through democratic governance and ensuring that there's a democratic practice within all the countries within Africa. But those they're having issues with that. So for them to say is the military, the civilian, if you watch, Sudan they're just coming out from 30 years of al-Bashir, and you know what such despot, what they do actually to survive and to sustain. So it's been a suppressed environment. So for them to say, that's why the citizens are actually revolting, that we seem to be having liberation, we seem to be having freedom, and you want to drag us back to what we are running away from.
Does this raise the fundamental question of the whole power-sharing deal, which analysts say has always been, fractious?
Yeah, it does.
Fundamentally wrong, not just in Sudan itself, but across other African countries where they've had to settle for, power-sharing deal. Does it raise the question of the desirability or otherwise of power sharing?
Why Sudan alone is even very difficult. A civilian setup sharing power with a military setup with some guerrilla militia forces, and there's serious conflict in Sudan. It's Islamic conflict. There's serious issues. So you can't get 3 people who are tripartite agreement, who are opposed, whose ideas of orientation, ideas of governance are different, and you're bringing them together. And the way military function, for them, taking command from the military is quite difficult. And don't equally forget, the civilian you're talking of, it's a very fractured. There are different political parties, different militia groups, different contending forces, contending ideologies, trying to merge
Which
together.
Is one of the reasons that the coup leader, General Abdel Fattah, has put forward that, he's blamed their political infighting to this coup. Does, I mean,
He would
sense?
do that. He shouldn't equally remove the fact that I think he's equally a very ambitious person.
Well, Paul.
I mean, that's in as much as that is there, he's wanting to take control of the power. That is equally one of the reasons we are experiencing this. So it's
All
not
right.
only.
Paul, how do you want to analyze this? The coup is just coming weeks before the military hands over leadership to the civilians. What do you think? And then Hamdok, of course, is under house arrest, but he's still calling that the population not give up the revolution.
I mean, like what I said, it's based on the erudition of the different institutions. The military would have found it very difficult to actually take orders from who presumed doesn't really have that power, that legitimacy. And don't forget that for them, there were certain promises that the civilian people came, especially on stabilizing the economy of Sudan, which they've not done. Or we call it blame the foreign partners that were supposed to come in and put in one or two things. But they've been able to achieve one or two, equally two things. That is one. And secondly, don't equally forget that the military guys are actually trying to protect their people. I mean, some of them will be going to ICC if case not taken. So by taking over, they are trying to prevent a lot of things. But for me, it's really, it's still morning on
Or
creation.
that they are really, really hungry for power. I mean, they are probably seeing
It's
the
part of
power
it.
slip
It's
out of their hands.
it's part
And
of
they're
it.
saying, no, we cannot hand over to the civilians.
I don't forget, I mean, before then, this current leader now, he had a good reputation. He wasn't part of that old regime, although he was a military guy, but he wasn't really at the forefront of that. So that confidence, that legitimacy was there, which he's trying to betray. And I don't know how he survived
Well,
that.
betrayal is exactly the word that the UK has used in describing this military coup. Paul Ogwu, thank you so much for joining us on News Now.